Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose. Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all races, colors, and creeds, welcome back to the investigative journal, the greatest show on earth. Greg Anthony here. What a show I have for you today. How did we get into this mess in America? I'm going to go back and tell you how we did. But first of all, why don't we discuss the impeachment hearings? What a joke that is, what's going on today. And let me give you an example of what I mean by this. The way they're handling the impeachment. First of all, it's the first it's the first partisan impeachment hearing held in the history of the United States. Second, it'd be like something like this. If I was a prosecutor and I went in to see a judge and I said, "Judge, I have a case here for burglary. I have all my witnesses. I have all of my evidence. And here are the charges. I can meet all the elements of burglary. And I have everything. And I want you to make a ruling on it. But we're not going to allow the defense to bring up any rebuttal witnesses or any evidence to the contrary. Is that okay?" And the judge goes, "Yeah, that's okay." Well, that's exactly what's going on in the House of Representatives. Even if you don't like Trump, he's not allowed to bring any witnesses. The Republicans are not allowed to bring any witnesses. And what is this telling you? It's telling you it's an orchestrated effort by both parties. You see, I go a little bit farther. That's why we call ourselves the greatest show on earth. Because you would think it's just basically one side fighting the other. But the other side is complicit as well, even though they're putting on a good show, like they object to what's going on. But what really are they doing outside of just a lot of hot air and talk? The Senate is controlled by the Republicans, so why aren't they fighting back? Why aren't they bringing any information regarding all the crimes and things that the supposed globalists or Democrats or socialists have done? But what they're doing is they're showing that there's a two-tier justice system here. They're showing you that if you side with America, if you side with Trump's philosophies, you're not going to win. Let's give you another example. Recently, if you follow the news at all, a guy by the name of Roger Stone, who was a Trump supporter, is facing life in prison for supposedly lying to Congress and a few other things. The real crime he committed was he backed Trump. And follow Roger Stone's story. He's a 67-year-old man. And you know how many people, what about James Clapper and all these other globalists who've lied to Congress? Why are they getting a free pass? But anyway, if you follow his case, what happened was they arrested him with a SWAT team coming into his house in Florida. He's a 67-year-old man on this political crime, so to speak. And CNN was notified, and they showed you pictures of these gunmen coming into his house. And now he is facing life in prison for supposedly lying to Congress, but he was really, if you look, set up. Now, on the other side, what about a globalist like Jeffrey Epstein, who has ties to the Clintons, Prince Andrew, and the rest of them? What happened to him? Well, when he was originally charged with crimes against children, there were 34 people who came up and accused him of pedophilia, or having sex with minors, having sex with women against their will. Now, here's the deal. What happened to him? Well, he didn't have a SWAT team come in and arrest him. His lawyer was contacted, and they, privately, quietly turned themselves in. He received 18 months on a suspended sentence in Florida. And then, after about 3 or 4 months, he got to leave the facility 12 hours a day to go working 6 days a week. So he's treated with kid gloves because, you know what? the power elite were all behind him. And the globalists were all there. So there's a two-tier system going on here, and the impeachment hearings are a perfect example of this. So, you have now, what I'm saying going on is nothing more than basically what Trump calls it, a witch hunt. And you would think it's just basically the Democrats against the Republicans. But I believe that both parties are working together on this. And the end result is going to be to show you that, really, if you don't side with the globalists, let's make it real simple, and socialism on the horizon here, and their plan of taking away most of all your rights, guns, your health care rights, etc., etc., then you'll have no recourse. The justice system has, like the media, turned to globalism. Okay? And you are basically, if you're following America and you want to uphold the Constitution, etc., etc., you're on the losing end of a battle that's been going on since the formation of our country. But I believe there's many people that don't even understand how we got into this mess. And when you start talking about it in terms like we're going to talk about it today, then people start to wonder, really, what the hell really did happen? And if you're a thinking person, if you're apt to go past what you've been told in high school history class and college history classes about the founding fathers and the formation of this country, you're apt to understand that this was a setup from the beginning. And it's a slow movement towards world domination, America being one of the last cogs in the globalist wheel. So how did we get to this point? And we have to start back, I think, with the Revolutionary War. Now, we all know our stories. We all have heard the story that America fought England, and we did this whole revolution because of a minor tax. If you looked at the taxes, the Boston Tea Party and the taxes were too heavy. If you look at the taxes that we pay now, it's far greater than what England was imposing on the settlers back then. That was just the front, but behind it there was much more. And I wanted to make the premise that the Vatican and the Jesuit order were well behind the movement to create this American Revolution for a reason. They always wanted control of the New World. And we're going to turn again to an idea that Tupper Saucy came up with in his book, Rulers of Evil, and I got onto it yet last week. I haven't done this in a few years. And it's really a good book to look at the revolution from a different aspect, to look at the controllers, the founding fathers, from a different aspect. Then put it together with whatever you have. For example, you're going to hear in the alternative media one story. You're going to hear another story from the mainstream media. Well, here's a third one. And this is where you enter Rome, the Vatican, the Jesuit order, and what they were doing behind the scenes to basically get into this country. And if we can go to Saucy's book, I'm going to mention, here's what he says. He says, before the American Revolution, Roman Catholics were barred from voting or holding public office throughout the British colonies. Okay, and we've talked about this many times, and besides this paragraph from Saucy, we've done a lot of research. I'm showing you the numbers of people that were here, the reasons that the settlers came here to form a country that was devoid of the Vatican and Jesuit tyranny that they were used to in England. Remember, we always say, remember the gunpowder plot, and who was really the Jesuits behind them, trying to blow up Parliament? Yeah, in the 1600s, and much more that went on there. So Europeans, especially Bible-believing Christians, wanted the Vatican out of the way. They didn't want to be involved because they knew that any country the Jesuits got into, they tried to overthrow it for their own purposes. Now, according in Saucy's book, he goes on to say, Catholics back in before the American Revolution were basically a persecuted minority everywhere but in the proprietary domain of William Penn, Pennsylvania and Delaware. Some of their most energetic persecutors, in fact, were the very Huguenots whom the Catholics had chased out of France in the wake of Louis XIV's revocation of the Edict of Nantes. Now, the basis of the Roman Catholic persecution was always political. Catholics owed allegiance to who? The Pope, Pontifex Maximus, the Bishop of Rome. The Bishop of Rome was a foreign ruler who, as a matter of public policy, regarded the British king and his Protestant church as heretics, to be destroyed in any way possible. Now, from the American colonists' standpoint, to allow Catholics, according to Saucy in his book here, to vote or hold office was tantamount to surrendering their colonies to a foreign conqueror. And a crucial part of maintaining personal liberty in Protestant colonial America was keeping Roman Catholics out of government. Okay? Now look at what it is. If you check the rolls of government, you'll see that it's filled with Catholics, Catholic sympathizers, our foreign leaders, our ambassadors, and everybody. School of Foreign Service at Jesuit Georgetown University produces all of them. So our government is basically controlled by the very people in the beginning that we didn't want here, or the people that were here when the country was founded, before the country was founded, didn't want here. Now, the colonial citizenry fought for and won their independence from Great Britain. They established the Constitution that amounted to surrendering their country to a foreign conqueror. Consider the legalities to this. We're stepping ahead now to what really happened. Before the Constitution was ratified, listen to this, American Catholics had very few civil rights. After ratification, they had them all. Article 6, Section 3 provides that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the authority of the United States. While the First Amendment denies Congress the power to make any law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, with Article 4, Section 3 and the First Amendment, the Constitution welcomed agents of Pontifex Maximus, the world's chief enemy of Protestantism, into the ranks of government. So here we had the majority of people back then did not want Catholics here for a reason. But you know what? Here's a perfect example. The elite creating this country did. They didn't listen to the will of the people. They basically formulated a constitution that on its surface gives us all these rights. But what was the hidden agenda here? And if we look back at what was going on at the time, that's exactly what they did. If somebody would have looked at most people back then that understood what the Vatican was about, and if one of these founding fathers came and said, listen, we're going to allow them all in here again, the Jesuits too, and do you think it's a good idea? They all would say no. But what they did is this sneaky little lawyer trick, and that is to allow them in under the freedom of religion. Everybody can basically practice their religion. The only problem with that is the religion they were letting in, Catholicism, although the people in the pews would practice Catholicism, the leaders really weren't involved in religion. They were involved in overthrowing governments and politics. So, here we go. Pontifex Maximus now has an open door to America. And statistics here show that of the 2.5 million enumerated inhabitants in 1787 in America, so we've got 2.5 million in America, the Roman Catholic population, and this is discounting Native Americans, the Roman Catholic population consisted of no more than 16,000 in Maryland, 7,000 in Penn, Pennsylvania, 1,500 in New York, and 200 in Virginia. However, Once the Constitution was in place, steady influx of European immigrants transformed Roman Catholicism from America's smallest to largest religious denomination, and by 1850 the higher powers at Rome could view the United States as early as 1850 as a viable tributary, if not another papal state. And they did it with immigration. Now, this didn't just happen by coincidence, and Saucy submits that it was brilliantly designed and commanded by a man behind the scenes. He honors him as America's least known founding father. His name was Jesuit General Lorenzo Ricci, R-I-C-C-I. And he was a Tuscan aristocrat by birth, a stoical philosopher by reputation, and a Jesuit father by profession. He was a superior general of the Society of Jesus during the formative years of the American Revolution from 1758 until 1775. He also may be credited with having written the most celebrated treatise on war ever published, a work entitled The 13 Articles Concerning Military Art. Sounds like something now people are saying, well, I thought Sun Tzu wrote that. Well, the reputed author of this work is quasi-historical Chinese general believed to have lived in the 6th century BC named Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu was unknown to Western language until Joseph Marie Amiot, astronomer to the Emperor of China, a Jesuit, by the way, brought forth a French edition to the 13 Articles in 1772. Amiot was a Jesuit. Now, let me ask you a question. When I say the Jesuits are everywhere, and that they were in China, they were basically in the court of China in the 16th century. And Amiot was the top astronomer to the Emperor of China. Brought forth a French edition of the Articles of Sun Tzu. Amiot was a general priest under obedience to Ricci. And his inference that Ricci is the author, Saucy inferred that Ricci could be the author of Amiot's Sun Tzu on a remark from today's premier Jesuit spokesman, Malachi Martin, retired professor at the Pontifical Institute in Rome, to the effect that a book written by Jesuit due to the obedience factor can be presumed, quote, in essence, to be the work of his superior general, Amiot's Sun Tzu, then can be presumed to have been written by Lorenzo Ricci. The Black Pope's decision to publish Sun Tzu prior to the outbreak of the revolution he had engineered demonstrates, Saucy believes, his confidence that divine authority had already delivered victory to him. Ricci knew that the circumstances had reached the point at which there was nothing which his enemy, the forces of Protestant on both sides of the Atlantic, could do to alter the outcome. He basically, according to Saucy, was like a chess master who sees the inevitability of checkmate 4, 5, 6 moves ahead and reveals his winning method out of courtesy to the imminent loser. His method was so sublimely Sun Tzuian that his opponents never even perceived his army to be an opponent. Just as Protestants today, folks, are unaware and still do not understand what the true Jesuit mission is. And let me break here for a minute, as this part of Saucy's book is quite interesting, because once you start putting building blocks on what he's saying, you start to see a mountain of evidence that shows you the real intention of what this country was set up for. And really that the Founding Fathers were not working for the will of the people, but using this new American frontier and its Constitution of Freedom as a front for their hidden agenda that was already mapped out for them by who should be the top Jesuit general, Lorenzo Ricci, and others, who were adept at doing this kind of revolution. If you look at all the revolutions the Jesuits were involved in around this time, it's amazing. And this is just another one. Here we go. So what I'm getting at is today Protestants in our country are unaware of this story. When I do this story, I still cannot get it on mainstream. I couldn't even get it on most of the alternative stations if you concentrate on it, because I cannot see how you can live in this country and get barraged by hundreds and hours of this impeachment garbage on Fox News and on CNN every day of your life, and not understand, and then just grumble, whatever side you're on. If you're on the globalist side, you're going to say, how could we have put in a man like Trump? And if you're on the Trumpian side, you say, how could America ever come to a socialist state? How could we ever reach this point where there's no justice? And that's how everybody does. But they got to go farther. And this is the story that will take you to the promised land, so to speak. It'll take you to the doorstep of the way this country was founded and who was behind it. And even if a lot of things are circumstantial evidence can be powerful even in a court of law. But once, like I said, you start adding up the mountain of evidence on top of what Saucy brings to you here, you start really understanding that something's up in Denmark, right? And I remember before Tupper Saucy died, we conversed and he said, I hope people just start adding things to this. He said, Greg, look into some things. Look into the occult. Look into the Jesuit writings. Start adding on to what was already building, he called it his foundation for helping others to get on the right track. And he laid a decent foundation for people. And the question is, can people accept the premise? And I think they can, because once you start looking and you take it piece by piece, it's almost as if you were, pleading your case to the American people. And on the other side, you have this whole media operation, this whole, historic, you have Washington, D.C., you have the media, you have both political parties, you have the religious leaders in our country, all band together to keep this story away. Because this is the one little Achilles heel that could really put a slow stop to this grinding, everlasting globalist train that keeps pushing along and taking away your right at every stop it makes. They know that this story, the story that involves the real founding fathers, the real formation, the reasons for the formation of this country, and some of the facts that we show here on this show are devastating because it explains everything. For example, we started the show by talking about impeachment. What is it? It's a circus, but it's an orchestrated circus, a system of Hegelian dialectic that we talk about, where the left and the right apparently seem to be at odds, but are actually working together to get their own synthesis. So both parties, by taking opposing views, are allowing this to occur. My advice, come back in the second half hour and don't fall prey to either one of them. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour, and as the promo said, the Jesuit command, the Supreme Jesuit command doesn't want you to listen to any of this stuff. Well, let's pick up where we left off. So we have this idea. Back then, how did they accomplish? So we talked about Lorenzo Ricci using Sun Tzu's Art of War, whether he wrote it or not, this kind of strategy to basically allow your enemy to think that you don't exist or you're very weak. And that's exactly what he did. And many people say, well, Greg, how can you even bring up this man as being in this role? Because at this time he was already dead and he was already imprisoned by the Pope when the Jesuits were disbanded just prior to this. And I said, because of their activity in the old world, in Europe. And I said, okay, that's what the history books tell us. But they tell us a lot of things, don't they, that aren't true. And what if he wasn't dead? What if they hid him out? He came to America and in the last stages and was actually here when the Constitution was ratified. And what if he actually orchestrated his own death? Now, let's just look at that for a moment. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. If you look at history, how many other figures in the world? A lot of times, people in this world that they created, they have faked their death and used new identities to carry out their plans. So you have to start looking at this isn't something new. So if they could do that, back then it would be a lot easier. They didn't have mass media. How do you know if he was in that prison? But anyway, the idea needs to be looked at because you can't trust anything that comes out in the mainstream. So anyway, they said the Jesuits were disbanded. But isn't it curious that right after America was up and running in the 1820s, the Vatican decided to reinstitute the order? Huh, okay. So it wasn't very long that they were disbanded, but maybe they were for this purpose. Because wouldn't it be great if the Protestants here, who did not want the Vatican, got word that the Jesuits were disbanded, and they said, wow, we'll celebrate in the streets, our enemy is gone. But, as Ricci and Sun Tzu would say, they could get more done under that premise than they could if they came with an army of 1 million people to overthrow America. And they did it in this manner, by creating a country based on the freedom of press, based on the freedom of religion, based on the First Amendment. And instead, they came in through the back door, correct? So Ricci could be, and look at it from this point of view. The Vatican and the Jesuits, since their formation, always needed one another. It was the Vatican who created the Jesuits to fight the Protestant Reformation. So it's kind of like a good cop, bad cop. They always needed each other, even in the bad times. And another thing you have to remember, when the Jesuits were being disbanded, there was a huge trial in Portugal. And the high crimes and misdemeanors and all of these things were being brought out in a court case. And I won't get into the specifics. It was about a high-level Jesuit in Portugal that was being prosecuted for embezzling a lot of money. And guess what? Lorenzo Ricci came to that trial and testified on the behalf of the state, in a sense. He gave up all the Jesuit secrets right out in the open, so that they had a reason to say, yes, we should expel them from here. We should expel them from there. This is why they got expelled in 81 countries, right? He actually provided the evidence. Why would he do that if he didn't want the world to think the Jesuits were no longer around? So let's move forward. So we have the Protestants today thinking that, wow, the Jesuits are just a band of merry, happy, very educated men all over the world working on our side. The same thing's going on today. They don't understand the true mission. Now, the 13 articles, or the Sun Tzu's Art of War, were ignored after this by Americans until when? The 1970s, when corporate execs discovered that their Oriental counterparts were doing business according to Sun Tzuian strategy. Okay, so as I was saying, these articles of Sun Tzu have been ignored until when? The 70s. And U.S. corporations, they increased their presence in the Pacific Rim, and these executives from America discovered that their Oriental counterparts were doing business according to Sun Tzuian strategies. And as U.S. corporations increased their presence in the Pacific Rim, Sun Tzu became a major survival tool. Since the middle 80s, more than 50 editions of the articles have been published in this country, mostly under the Art of War. So these editions, they represented Sun Tzu well enough, but none of them are derived from 1772 Amiot translation into French. Itself was based on a Manchurian version of the older Chinese manuscripts. Amiot Sun Tzu appears never to have been published in English, although a 1996 commission by Label Inglese produced a very fine manuscript English translation by Herman F. Garcia. That manuscript is the source of many citations in this book that Saucy wrote. As he states, only the Amiot edition reflects in virtually the Jesuit general's own words how he formed the United States of America by dividing the British Empire against itself. while at the same time dividing the rest of Europe against Britain, against even the general's own army. The Amiot is all the more remarkable for appearing in the very midst of the unfolding of this extraordinary process. So can you see what's happening here? We got the Sun Tzu's Art of War published, but not the Amiot version. That was the Jesuit publication. And it shows you perfectly how this war was orchestrated. Now, do you think Trump can orchestrate anything? No, of course not. He has somebody behind the scenes. You think Obama could orchestrate anything? No, somebody behind the scenes. And it goes on and on and on. So the same thing was going on back then. And Amiot begins the 13 articles by noting how odd it is that the benign Chinese or morality should spawn a warrior of Sun Tzu's magnitude. It states this: if we are to judge the Chinese by their morals, and in general by everything one can concurrently observe of them, we would instantly conclude that this must be the most pacifist nation in the world, far from having the brilliant qualities necessary for warriors. Yet surprisingly, this very nation, which has subsisted for nearly 4,000 years in approximately the same state we see it today, has always, or almost always, triumphed over its enemies. And when it had the misfortune of being conquered, it gave its laws to the conquerors themselves. And Saucy says, we know this. Amiot says, from the annals, which contain admirable accounts of prodigious bravery, and lists of actions and military conduct of various founders of dynasties. Now, as I was reading this, I was thinking, you've seen all the movies in Hollywood that you can get your hands on about the Revolutionary War, about all of the things that went on. But wouldn't this be a great movie to make? Exactly how Ricci and the Jesuits manipulated this war to create America, and how from there they grew into this organization. It would be a great, great movie. And who do you think would make it, since the Jesuits control Hollywood? And you're going to say, no, Greg, the Jews control Hollywood. Well, let's steal something from Eric Phelps, who's been called a Jesuit shill himself many times. It's the Papal Court Jews in Hollywood. Okay? So, we have the Amiot says from he explains these prodigious bravery by the people of China. What heroes, what politicians, what warriors. No Alexander or Caesar could surpass them. Why shouldn't these great men, these powerful geniuses, who made such fine political and civil laws, have made military laws which were just as fine? The reference to Caesar is significant. Declaring China's dynasty heroes to be Caesar's equals, Amiot equates Lorenzo Ricci, the reigning bearer of Caesarian authority, with the greatest Oriental warriors. Were the Oriental military laws just as fine as Caesar's? It's not up to me to judge, said Amiot in his book. Our warriors must pronounce themselves in this regard. If the term our warriors means our Jesuit brethren, as Saucy believes it does, then we have before us Ricci's clandestine order that the book he received by the scattered members of the society as the latest statement of the general's military law. Clandestine generals order clandestinely. Amiot admits that translating a war manual was contrary to his taste and so far from the object of his profession. He says that he only undertook the work in hopes that the reader might have some pleasure conversing with these foreign heroes and receive some of their instructions and finding some of it useful. What cannot be denied is that Rome was served by critical events in America and England during the years of Ricci's reign in ways that flow quite discernibly from the strategies, laws, and maxims set forth in the 13 articles. I believe, says Saucy, that anyone reading Amiot Sun Tzu in 1772, knowing what its translator was a Jesuit, knowing the Jesuit mission, and knowing the nature of Jesuit obedience, could observe world events with this knowledge and predict that the dispute between America and American colonists and the British empires would end, as it actually did, in Roman dominance over a new independent republic. So there you have it. People have always asked me, what is the hidden agenda? And that is the hidden agenda in a very, very quick way to put it, a very simplistic but true way to put it. So America colonists and the British Empire would end, as it actually did, in the dominance of Rome over a new independent republic. Before presenting the works of Sun Tzu, Amiot recounts an important legend demonstrating the severity of Sun Tzuian authority. It is a severity that empowers the general to overrule even his sovereign in order to secure the army's perfect obedience. Hearing that the king of Wu was preparing for war and not wishing to remain idle, Sun Tzu offered his service to the king. The king had read Sun Tzu's book and liked it, but doubted its practicability. And this is an interesting little story, and I'm debating whether to go over it, but why not? Well, let's leave it for another time, because basically all it did was show that this general would override the head of the country. Okay? And I guess we could do it. Prince, replied Sun Tzu, I said nothing in my writings that I had not already practiced in the army. What I have not yet said, but which I presume to assure your majesty today, is that I am capable of transmitting these practices to anyone, whomever, and training them in military exercises when I am authorized to do so. I understand, replied the king. You wish to say that you will easily teach your maxims to intelligent men who are already both prudent that you will have no difficulty given training in military exercises to men unaccustomed to hard work, who are docile and full of goodwill. But the majority is not of that nature. It matters not, replied Sun Tzu. I said anyone, whomsoever, and I exclude no one from my offer, including the most cowardly and the weakest of men. To hear you speak, said the king, you would even inspire women to have the feelings of warriors? You would train them to bear arms? Yes, Prince, replied Sun Tzu in a firm voice, and I beg your majesty to be assured of it. The king, who in the circumstance in which he found himself was no longer entertained by the customary amusements of the court, took advantage of this opportunity to find a new sort of amusement. He said, bring me 180 of my wives. He was obeyed, and the princesses appeared. Among them were two in particular whom the king loved tenderly. They were placed ahead of the others. We will see, said the king, smiling. We will see, Sun Tzu, if you will be true to your word. I make you general of these new troops. All throughout my palace you need only choose the place which seems the most comfortable to give them military training. When they are sufficiently instructed, you will let me know, and I will come myself to render justice to them and to your talent. The general sensed the ridicule of the role he was asked to play, but he did not back down, and instead appeared quite satisfied by the honor bestowed on him by the king, not only by allowing him to see his wives, but also by putting them under his direction. I will do well with them, sire. And he said in an assured tone, and I hope that soon your majesty will have cause to be satisfied with my services. At the very least, your majesty will be convinced that Sun Tzu is not a man who takes risks. Once the king had retired to his apartments, the warrior thought only of executing his commission. He asked for weapons and the military equipment needed for his newly created soldiers. While waiting for everything to be ready, he led his troop into one of the courtyards of the palace, which seemed the best suited for his work. Soon the items had been requested were brought to him. Sun Tzu then spoke to the princesses. "Here you are," he said. "Under my direction and my orders, you must listen to me attentively and obey me in whatever I command you. That is the first and most essential military law. Make sure you don't break it. By tomorrow I want you to perform exercises before the king, and I intend for them to be done perfectly." After those words, he strapped on their swords, put spears in their hands, divided them into 2 groups, and put one of the favored princesses at the head of each. Once the arrangement was made, he began his instructions in these terms. "Can you tell the difference between your chest and your back, and your right hand and your left hand? Answer me." At first, the only response he received was some bursts of laughter, but he remained silent and very serious. "Yes, of course," the ladies then replied in one voice. "If that is so," resumed Sun Tzu, "then listen carefully to what I am going to say. When the drum strikes only 1 beat, you will remain as you are now, only paying attention to what is before your chest. When the drum strikes 2 beats, you must turn so that your chest is in the place where your right hand was before. If instead of 2 beats you hear 3, you must turn so that your chest is precisely where your left hand was before. But when the drum strikes 4 beats, you must turn so that your chest is where your back was, and your back will be where your chest was." What I just said may not be clear enough. Let me explain. A single drum beat means that you must change your position, and you must be on guard. 2 beats means you must turn right. 3 beats means you must turn left, and 4 beats means you must make a half turn. I will explain even more. This is the order I shall follow. First I will strike 1 beat at that signal, and will be ready to receive my orders. A few moments later I will strike 2 beats altogether, and you will turn to the right with gravity, after which I will not strike the beats but 4, and you will make a half turn. I will strike 1 beat. At the first signal, be ready. Then I will strike not 2 beats, but 3, and you will turn left. Have you understood what I'm saying? If you have any difficulties, you have to speak out to me, and then I shall attempt to explain the matter. We have understood?" replied the ladies. "If that is so," responded Sun Tzu, "I will begin. Do not forget that the sound of the drum takes the place of the general's voice, but he is the one who is giving these orders." After repeating his instructions 3 times, Sun Tzu again aligned his army, after which he had the drum strike 1, and that sound all the ladies began to laugh. At 2, the drum beats, they even laughed louder. Even serious, the general spoke to them thus: "It is possible that I did not explain to you." He had the drum strike 1 beat, and then 2. Seeing them look so serious, and given the strange situation they found themselves in, the ladies forgot to obey. After attempting in vain to stop the laughter that was choking them, and finally let it burst out forthfully loudly, Sun Tzu was in no way disconcerted, but in the same tone he had used when speaking to them before, he said, "If I had not explained myself clearly, or if you had not assured me in unison that you understood what I said, you would in no way be guilty. But I spoke to you clearly, as you admitted. Why did you not obey? You deserve punishment, and military punishment. Among the makers of war, whoever does not obey the orders of the general deserves death. Therefore you will die." After the short preamble, Sun Tzu ordered the women who formed the 2 lines to kill the 2 who were leading them. Just then, one of the men, whose job it was to guard the women, seeing that the warrior was not joking, ran to warn the king of what was happening. The king sent someone to Sun Tzu to forbid him from going any farther, and in particular from mistreating the 2 women he loved the best and without whom he could not live. The general listened with respect to the words that were spoken on behalf of the king, but he refused to bow to his wishes. "Go tell the king," he replied, "that Sun Tzu believes him to be too reasonable and too just to think he might have changed his mind so soon, and that he truly wishes to be obeyed in what you have just told me on his behalf. The prince is the lawmaker. He would not give orders which would sully the dignity vested in me." Well, anyway, it goes on, and the rest, at this particular juncture, the rest is up to him, right? They disobeyed me, they will die. So saying, he pulled out his sword, and with the same calmness he had displayed until then, he cut off the heads of the two who were leading the others. He immediately put two others in their place and had the drum strike the various beats she had explained in his troops, and it was as if these women had been professional soldiers all their lives. They made their turn silently and impeccably. Sun Tzu spoke thus to his envoy. Go tell the king. He said that his wives know how to do the drill. Okay, now guess what? They sure do. They know how to do the drill. And when the king learned what happened, he was penetrated by the deepest sorrow. With a great sigh, he said, thus have I lost what was dearest to me in this world. Have that foreigner returned to this country. I do not want him or his services. What have you done, barbarian? How can I go on living? And so on. As unconscionable as the king was, time and circumstance soon made him forget his loss. His enemies were ready to descend upon him. He asked Sun Tzu to return, made him general of his armies, and with his help he destroyed the Chao kingdom. Those of his neighbors who had formerly been the most worrisome were now penetrated by fear at the mere mention of the glorious acts of Sun Tzu, and throughout only of living peacefully under the protection of a prince who had such a man at his service. So basically, what does it tell you? If you don't listen to me, we're going to cut your head off. And if you don't follow the supreme Jesuit command even to this day, you are going to get your head cut off in more ways than one. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.